Yeah, we are the ones who are always talking about locks and physical security and breaking into places. We are, of course, consultants at our firm, but the fun part of our job when we consult is breaking into buildings at night. We do physical pen testing. We go and we steal things. And this, I love this photo. This is a story from a company that did software development. They actually did embedded code for routers and switches. And they were concerned that someone could, well, can anyone, get our code repo? Because that would be really bad. If someone got our firmware, they might try to reverse it. And there was a big pen test of this firm. It was people trying to go in over production web servers, and somebody else, they tried to just get the network from the parking lot with a Wi-Fi antenna. And we were brought in, and we broke in at 2 in the morning, and we just took a server and left. And we said, done, problem solved. And the client didn't think anyone would actually walk into the building. And we said, yeah, who are you playing with here? This is, as my fiance says, we're kind of professionally dangerous. That's our job, and I love that about us. We do a lot of scary things, but we're not scary people. We're really nice people. And hopefully, we can finally get a little more understanding from areas and industries that haven't really taken any security seriously on the cyber DeepSec side, the network side, or the physical side. I speak to a lot of, because it's not a real hacker presentation without the Verizon breach report, right? I speak to a lot of big utility companies, and now, in at least where we come from, water, power, all kind of people on the grid, they're actually talking about tech defenses, network defenses. If you saw the report back a while ago where the water company actually had people coming in and, it was a real SCADA attack. It wasn't probably an attack, it was just bored kids, but they were changing PLCs. They were actually changing flow rates on pipes. So in our country, finally people are taking network security really seriously because it can have physical world repercussions. Well, obviously, the problems on the network side are never due to outdated software, right? This was a water company that we did a pen test on. But the physical side, when we say real-world physical repercussions, I love showing people even more directly how someone can physically get in. It's not like, oh, I can get in on your network and change this valve over here. I can literally get in on the door and walk up to your network and throw a console cable and everything. And that, to me, is the best kind of breach. It's the most physical access you could ever have. And we tell our clients all the time, you can do everything correct on your network, but if someone physically breaks in because your locks were bad, that's the ball game. And obviously, if I'm on site in these buildings, I can just walk up to the PLCs and the controllers. I can walk up and steal things, man. Like, forget stealing a server. Small companies, like this was, again, a different water company, we told them, we're like, look, there's a ton of copper here. There's a ton of smart meters here. There's a ton of really dangerous chemicals. And if you show people, isn't it great when you show people, look, this is how I got in. This is what I could have done. I love these kind of photos. When we report things, I say, I didn't just get in and take your data. I could have got in and taken poisonous gas. So the simple thing I love to talk about is just the door itself. That's what this talk is about. It's about doors and padlocks. Most people who've met me before, here at DeepSec or at other conferences, I'm known as a lockpicker. And later today, we're going to have a nice table spread out. Who has ever done any lockpicking? Who has never done lockpicking? Okay, we're going to let all of you try lockpicking and all of the attacks that you're seeing in these slides as well. But lockpicking, it's fun. I love teaching it. But it's not really what I do on a job. People think, oh, wow, Deviant and his crew, they must have picked the doors. Not really. There's way easier ways to get in. Yes, locks can be bad. And if you've never tried lockpicking, again, I want you to come try it. How locks work on the inside is very easy to understand. If you've never seen this sort of diagram before, if you've never taken a lock apart, I'll teach you what's happening. I'll teach you why it works with a key. I will also teach you why it's possible to go into the lock without a key. Manipulating the pins inside of a conventional lock, picking locks open is not Hollywood magic. And everyone in here who had your hand up saying, oh, I've never picked a lock, please come learn from us. I can show you how this works. But that's not the focus of today's talk. Later on, when we're outside, after the breaks, absolutely come and learn about locks. But as I say, on a job, this is not what I'm doing. I'm not squatting at the door with my picks. I have my picks. I never need my picks. So we'll talk about locks later. Right now, let's talk about simpler things that we do all the time when we want to physically get in a building. The hinges of a door. Do you know how many times I have popped the pins out of hinges and just pulled the door away from the wall? This is not hard to do. Has anyone ever fixed a door in their own house and they've popped the hinges out? Like the hinge pins are easy to remove. You can use a nail, or they make a special tool so you don't hit your fingers. But no matter how many locks there are on one side of the door, look at the other side. There's no hinges over here. These hinges are on the outside of the door. So I can just pop those hinges out and pull the door away from the wall. I've done this a bunch of times. And sometimes I did it in the middle of the day. I walked up to a server room, and it was just a couple of us, and we had coveralls. And we just popped the hinges, and people were walking by us. They're like, oh, excuse me, I didn't know people were working in the hallway. Nobody notices. Nobody cares. Now, everything I'm going to show you, there's a fix for. I will show you the solution. So for hinges, this is something that exists. It's called a security hinge. It has a little peg. The little peg goes in this hole when the door shuts. And if you pop those pins out, that peg does not let you pull the door away from the frame. Completely solves this problem. I don't see these used almost anywhere. Now, if you already have all your doors and you don't want to rehang all your doors, what are these over here? These are called jam pins. If you have a regular hinge already and you don't want to replace it, you can buy these from a locksmith. You take out these two screws. You replace them with jam pins. You take out these two screws. You replace them with nothing. You now have a security hinge. It costs you no money, practically. It costs you no effort. You fix this problem. More people should do this. The latch on the door. This is when you close the door and it goes click. That little mechanism, in English we call it the latch, that catches the door and holds it shut. That is one of the most common ways that we try to slip doors open, spring-loaded latches. It's actually a really funny story to show you some tools here. This is a picture that I took when I met a friend of mine named Keith for the very first time. We knew each other online. We were both lockpickers. And we were going to a lockpicking event in Washington, D.C. And oh, Keith, I'm going to get to meet you there. Awesome. You're a good guy. So when he shows up, I was excited because Keith was a real locksmith. I mean, I'm not a locksmith. I pretend to be one, I guess. People think I am a locksmith. I just pick them. But Keith was a real locksmith. And I said, Keith, I would love to know, he works in the government now. I said, do you still have your little kit that you always carried with you? I'd love to see real field tools that a locksmith used. So he dumped all this on the table, and I was like, all right, well, that's actually not very exciting. I kind of meant, I guess you're fixing things all the time, but I meant your entry kit. He's like, hey, Deviant, this is my entry kit. This is all the tools. These are my 3 most popular entry tools. And I said, what? Because, again, I was a lockpicker. I didn't think about the latch or anything like that. He's like, oh, yeah, this one in the middle, this little hook, this is probably the greatest thing I've ever used. This little angle right here, I reach into door, and I said, where did you get this? And he found it at a yard sale. But I found this same tool. It's used in the garment industry. And now I use this more than anything else on jobs. So here's a locked door. This is at a water company. Now let's look a little closer at that. What happened? So again, this is a completely locked door. So what's happening there? Well, all I'm doing is I'm slipping in the door frame with my hook, and I'm grabbing the latch. I can reach in the strike, I can pull, I can turn. This is called shimming a door. It might even be called lloyding a door. Back in the old days, have you ever seen on spy TV shows where they take a credit card and they stick it in the door? It's the same thing. Before there were credit cards, people had celluloid film, and that's what they would slip into doors to try to do this, and it was called lloyding. It's been around for 100 years almost. You can do it with Slim Jim tools, the same thing. Slim Jims are really for automotive opening, but we use them. We use them all the time. We reach in, we slip the latch and pull it. It doesn't matter, by the way, if a door is protected with a plate. Here's a different door. All right, let's take a look. Put a nice wire behind that. Lol, oops. Okay, why is this happening? This should not happen on doors. Modern doors, you shouldn't be able to do this. This is because many times latches are installed incorrectly. If you've ever seen a door open, there's all different types of latches. Most modern doors feature what is called a dead latch. A dead latch, first of all, what is the latch in this picture, right? This part here in yellow, this is the latch. This is what holds the door shut when it closes. Many people, you've seen doors that only have that. There's just a latch. But there's often an extra plunger, an extra piece, an extra click, some other extra mechanism. That mechanism is important. And if all you ever do is see a door when it's open, you may not know what's supposed to happen here. Dead latches, they work kind of like a deadbolt when the door shuts if the extra button is pressed in. I don't know how many does anybody know about this sort of stuff? This is when your door closes, the strike plate is supposed to be the right shape and just the right size to hold back little mechanisms, little plungers. If that happens, you can't hook or push or anything on the latch. It is dead. It is fixed. None of these attacks work. In the real world, however, in office buildings, we see a lot of problems with this. Here's a great example, right? Electronic door, card reader door, nice lock. This is a piece of garbage. Literally, we took it out of the trash, a piece of plastic. That's the circus. Look at the size of that hole right there. It's way too big, way too big. It's not, the latch is in, the plunger is sticking in, nothing is being held back by the door frame. That makes this attack possible. And the problem is, how many people have ever worked in a building with card access, right? And you can either have a magnetic lock or you can have a little solenoid in the door striker. The wrong size of door strike hole is a big problem. And we see this all the time when installers are setting up offices. Like, oh, remember, we've got to go do that job tomorrow. Make sure they've got 16 new doors. Order the number 27s because they have that big hole. That always works no matter what door the client has. So installers will order the wrong part, usually the one with the big hole, because it always works, right? No matter what shape the door is or where the latches are, you can always install that one. But it makes this attack possible. This is Padlock, who you may have met at a DeepSec long ago, looking completely ninja in this video. This is a locked door. I swear to God, this door is locked. But he's like, oop, boom. Badge that does nothing, but this is the inside. Look, there's a plunger. It's not working.
You got it.
That security latch should be holding that plunger back. And we do this everywhere. We do this at tech companies. We do this at, this is a water company. Door out in the field. This is a field pumping station. And again, with this $5 tool, this little hook, I can get into the well controls. I'm showing another client here. Again, a really nice door at a utility company. From the outside, these look really intimidating. But again, this tool, it's literally a $5 hook. And if the door isn't installed correctly, like, I don't belong in there. Why? You don't want me in that room. I don't want to be in that room. I'll kill myself in there. But I got in there from this little hook tool and the fact that the door wasn't installed correctly. Same area of the door. The latch is right here. Let's look on the inside of the door, the handle that you use when you're inside and you want to leave. All right? Like these kind of big crash bar handles. Looks locked. Lol, oops. No. That was just a bent piece of rod that I just grabbed out of the in the back of my truck. I just bent a rod. They have really nice tools to do this that'll be really strong and stable. Here's Robert from our company reaching in. Bam. Clean, perfect, easy access. If you have a gap in between your doors of any kind, people can exploit that. You look at a door just right, you see the light coming through. That kind of thing, that's super exploitable. That you can see there's crash handles right there. There's a gap. I can even see daylight. This right here, this exact door, this is the door where the chlorine tanks were. And we used that exact tool that Robert had, pulled them open. They were also, we could have turned down the chlorine on the water supply or turned it up. A little gap like the little weather stripping, the seal, that rubber seal, that is not a security device. If you really want to be secure, you have to put a plate down the whole door so that someone can't reach in with any of these tools. And where we come from in the US, sometimes there's what are called exit paddles. There are a number of these little push and slap solutions. Every one of them is vulnerable to the same idea. Click. Now, can anyone tell me if you see, it's a little bit bright with these lights, but this is not daytime. This is 2 in the morning. What could they have done? You can see it on this video. There's something else they're not using. Can anyone tell me? Right. You can see it down here. It's a lock. It's a deadlock. So, deadbolt lock. Obviously, they're just relying on their badge reader at night. They could have locked it. Now, I say they could have locked it. This tool also exists. You know what this is? That's a thumb turn flipper. You stick it through the door. You go. Meow. These tools are out there. Governments have these tools. People who pretend that, with a nice letter that says, I'm from the... We buy these tools. These tools are out there. Be aware of that. Key boxes. Oh my God, do I love key boxes. I don't like when my clients have them, but I like because I can get in. If you don't notice that a lot of doors have little boxes on them or boxes on the wall nearby, these show up in weird places. Key storage boxes. Well, what are they? You don't see these as much in Europe. We see these a lot in the US. But there are some, it shocks you. This is a really nice door, properly installed, dead latch is working. This was a really good lock. I wasn't going to stand there trying to pick it. But way at the top of the door, this is not an alarm sensor or something. This is literally the key for the door. You have a really good lock and a really good key protected by a terrible lock. People think this do you see these ever in Europe sometimes, the tubular keys? People think they're really secure in America. And a lot of big industries use these keys because they look fancy. This is a tubular pick, and this is me with a clear lock, so you can see it's just pins. The same thing I'll teach you to pick later with regular pick tools. You can pick very fancy locks sometimes, even though they look interesting. Here we are, that lock is picked. And many times we will reach in and we'll just pick the lock with the terrible lock and we'll get the good key and open the good lock on the door. Now, where the real problem comes in, a lot of times for emergency access, and I know you do have this in Europe, a lot of doors for buildings will have their key right on the outside of the building inside of a security box. Now, if that's a good quality box, great. If you can trust the box, if it's installed correctly, great. This is installed in brick. Where I come from, this is installed in vinyl siding. Like someone could just crack this right off. I've seen buildings where the door is gone. Like this is just, here's another one, just gone. The key isn't there. Now, do you think this is the key for the building would be right in here? You know what interests me more? This lock interests me way more. Because if I take this lock out of the box and I take it home and I inspect it, what do you think I have then? I have the master key for that region of the city. And this has happened in cities where we come from. People have gotten the fire key, and then they can access all of the doors in a region. It's hard to protect against this. We see this too all the time. We see, especially where we live far out of cities, there might be a big water tower. Now, the people who run the water company, they have their key to get out in the field, but there's phone company equipment on top of a lot of towers. So every little phone company field technician has his or her own key, and they're all attached to like the fence with these terrible key boxes. I can show anyone how to any little multiple wheel box for key. I can decode all of these. I can show you how to stick something in and get the code, and then you open it up, and then there's the key. Key boxes are the most laughable problem that I run into all the time, and it's really hard to get around that problem if you need all different people accessing the door. It's something to think about. Let's talk about something that's even funnier that I know you can do on your doors right here in this country easily. Exploiting the edge gap, the big gap that runs down on the inside of a door, all right? Here is a door in an office. It's locked. We shake it. Something's very loud, and somebody walks through. Well, that's kind of strange. What happened there? Let's look at a clear door. Here is a glass door. You can see. Now, we just showed, this is Babak again, and he just showed Ross this trick, and Ross is like, hey, come here, check this out. Look what I just learned. So now this is a development lab. This is one of our circuitry labs. Ross is trying to use a very sophisticated piece of equipment that I'll show you in a minute. And Babak is showing him where to stick the thing, and you can kind of see something happening inside the door there, and now the door is open. Well, what's that? What's this amazing hacker tool he has? It's dusting spray. If you want to clean the crumbs out of your keyboard, you just have to hold it like this. If you hold it upside down, the butane gas shoots out in a big cloud of cold air. What's happening? Well, many doors have a motion sensor on the inside. If you can trip that motion sensor with it, because most of these sensors, they're called request to exit sensors. If you're leaving a building, you've badged to get in, but when you leave, many times the door, you can just push it open. A lot of times, if a sensor sees you, it says, oh, this is a person, they must be leaving. They'll unlock the door. Most of these sensors are just infrared. All they can see is temperature. Hot, cold, they don't care. There are really good ones, by the way. There are really nice sensors that use microwave radar. They have to see roughly the size of a person, and it has to be coming to the door. They're more expensive, and they're likely to have false negatives. So people don't like that. People want it to always work, and they want it to be cheap. You get these infrared sensors. And it's really funny, some of the things people will do to play with these. So this is Dave Kennedy, a wonderful man. He's a very skilled hacker. He runs DerbyCon. He runs TrustedSec. So here he's an e-cigarette user, and he has he's sub-ohmed his coils to make really big clouds. So he's like, all right, he's listening to hear the big click. There you go. So again, like, how simple is that? There was one night, as Tara will tell you, she actually was with me. We left a bar. I used to live in Montana, and it's quiet evening, and I'm just walking down the street with a glass of whiskey. And I say, hey, you want to see something funny? And she knows the moment I say that, she's like, oh yeah, I want to see something funny. What are you going to do? So there was a bank, and I was like, hey, I think I can do something here. So this bank was locked. But I look up, there was a sensor, because you can see it right through the door. So get some whiskey. Oops. So the door's up. There are so many buildings that have this system. The idea that a temperature sensor sees a difference, opens the door. Now, sometimes you don't even really need hot or cold, seriously hot or cold drinks or anything like that. I've done it with just paper. Many times I'll walk up with a piece of paper just under my arm, just to get it a little warm. And I look like a person with an envelope. And I say, oh, is this building 7? I don't know. Is this? And that opens the door. Be aware of that. That little gap is all you need. Or a little gap at the bottom. This is another thing we exploit all the time. Back years ago, a doorknob used to literally be a knob. I'd turn a knob. And you still might have doorknobs in houses. But in commercial buildings, in big offices, nowadays almost everything is a lever handle. Now, I don't know about the laws in every country. I know where I come from, you have to do this. So if someone can't use their hands very effectively, they can still hit the handle and get in and out. It's for compliance that you have these lever handles. These are awesome if there's a gap on the bottom of the door. They're awesome for me. Here is, again, card reader door, nice lock, secure plate, but I'm nowhere near the lock. I'm down on my hands and knees here. And I'm fussing with something, and I reach and I pull something. Let's see what happens here. What was that? Well, let's look at it from the other side. I'm doing what's called an under-door attack. It is so unsophisticated. I'm literally delivering a wire with a metal rod under the door. I can hear and I can feel where I am. I know exactly what I'm touching, what I'm not. And if I think I'm in the right place, I just pull. And I can grab the inside handle. Under door tools are super basic. But if you know how tall the door is, which almost every door is the same height where we come from, the handle's in the same place, yank. This is not hard to do. And it's also not hard to fix. There are products that will make the bottom of that door, the gap, go away when the door shuts. This is an example of what's called a moving door bottom, a dynamic door bottom. A little animation here from this company trying to sell you this. This little plunger. If the door closes, that plunger drops down a bar. Now this animation, this is not a security product. This is just for heating and cooling insulation. But that same idea exists as a security product. There are much bigger, much more secure moving door bottoms. How many people have heard of Assa Abloy is a big lock manufacturer? They make a product like this, and when the door shuts, there's an interlock, and that bar is locked in position. And the floor, you usually put a plate on the floor. And like I've seen these on server rooms. You can't get under there's no way to get under that door. It's locked on the bottom. I've also seen, a company that had a little shroud around their handle. It made it I was under the door, I'm reaching, I'm looking, I can't hit it, I feel like I can't feel it. I'm pulling and nothing's happening. And we eventually snuck a camera under the door, and we're looking, we're like, oh, son of a bitch, look at this, all right. So we had to go a different way. And this isn't even a security product either. This is used in service corridors so that carts and things don't bang into door handles. But it's super cheap, and it's a way to fix this problem. Many of you, if you're staying here, have you ever seen handles where the handle's not mounted this way? It's mounted down or all the way down? There's a reason. Hotels and buildings know about this problem. We've known hotels where I said, hey, your door handles, last time I stayed here, they changed. Is that a under-door attack? And they're like, oh yeah, we've had people breaking into rooms. This is why handles are mounted like this in a lot of buildings now. One last thing about doors. I don't do this too often. I've only done it once, and it wasn't on a job. But actually spreading the door frame out with a jack. Criminals do this to break into apartments sometimes. If you're careful, you can do this without destroying the door. I had a neighbor whose doorknob, it was an antique house. I used to live in Philadelphia, very old homes, and, well, old is relative. Old for Americans, couple hundred years old. But we had about a 200-year-old house, and my neighbor, his doorknob blew up, basically. It shattered apart, cracked off, and the door was still locked, and he didn't know what to do. He couldn't get to half of his house. And I said, well, hang on. I went out to my truck, and I got the jack, and I chopped up some wood, and I just very slowly just cranked on the jack, and you could hear the whole house going, and I'm like, whew, everyone stand back. Cranking again. And eventually, though, I looked, and I had spread the door frame just enough that I went, and the door just swung open, and we eased it back down. Now, there are deadbolts. There are special products that when the bolt opens, it fires out to the side, and it actually locks in, or hooking bolts. These will prevent door frame spreading attacks. Is every one of these something you need to worry about? Not in every situation, but these are all valid entry methods that I've used, and they all have a solution. Really quickly, I promised I'd talk about some padlocks. So if we want to talk about padlocks, a couple of cheap, easy things that we will do, and you can try out there with me. Padlocks all have a shackle that rests in the body. When you stick your key down the keyway and you turn it, the plug is what's turning. And that only turns if the pin stacks are all working correctly. You turn the plug, the cam on the rear side will hit the release so that the latches can actually retract. Let's attack everything I just talked about really quickly. The latches, attacking the latches. Well, if you've never heard of padlock shims, has anyone seen shims before? Not a lot of hands. Come play with these. These are awesome. If you have a padlock that's open and you can click it shut, usually the latches are spring-loaded. That means I can go in like this with a shim, click on the shim down in there, and I just sprung the latch out of the way. If the latch is spring-loaded, it's like shimming the door. Same idea, I'm doing it with a padlock. That is crazy easy to do. And you can have a really big-looking padlock. It's still possible to do this many times over. So, nice big padlock, it's functioning. Here we go. This is at Robert's workbench. My guy in the company, Robert, took some of these videos because it's a beautiful, look at this. Shim goes in, let's squeeze it into position, and click. This is easy to do. You don't even have to use real shims. Shims are locksmith tools. We make them out of drinks cans. We just make them out of soda can. And if you cut up a soda can the right way, you can absolutely do this yourself. Now, how do you prevent that? Well, you need a mechanism that's not spring-loaded. A good quality lock, as many locks are, good padlocks will have ball bearings. And unless that plug turns, those ball bearings are not going anywhere. You see that there's no springs in here. Let's talk about attacking through the keyway. Let's talk about skeleton keys really quickly. And I know I'm really tight on time. We got a coffee break next. I'll be okay. So you don't have this lock in Europe. I've never seen this type of warded lock. In England, if anyone here is from across the channel, England uses warded locks. In the US, we use warded locks. Well, what's going on? This looks like a padlock. It's clearly a key with lots of cuts and bits on it. A warded lock is a completely inverted security model. Let me explain with a couple of diagrams what's happening here. So you have all these bits on the key, right? And the padlock looks like a proper padlock. But inside, it's not a bunch of little pins and springs. It's a single lever or catch. Now, this diagram, it's a little unclear. What's happening here? Those bumps of metal right here, all of these bumps are on the side of the keyway. Does this make sense? The key can slide next to them, and it'll get in, but it has to have the opposite bumps to turn correctly. All right? Is that clear? Now, when I say it's an inverted security model, literally a normal lock, the lock you use all the time, the key goes in, and it's the lock making the decision. The lock says, hey, are you the right key? I'll let you turn. With warded locks, it's like the key is making the decision. The key says, am I in the right place? It's the wrong key, will not turn, but the key itself is what's stopping it. The key has other bumps that shouldn't be there. Take them off. Just cut them all away. This is where the term skeleton key comes from. You trim away all the extra flesh, and you're left with the bare bones that will always hit the lever. And it'll hit every lever, every time. This is what warded pick tools are. These look like skeleton keys. These exist, warded pick sets. We use these very frequently in the UK. We use them in the US. They'll reach in, they'll find the lever, they'll hit the lever, they'll spring the lock open. Every single warded lock can be opened with a handful of those little tools. But most locks don't have wards. Most locks use pins. Let's talk about a stupid easy bypass on pin-based locks. Overlifting. What is overlifting? Well, these are comb tools, comb picks. Normally, overlifting doesn't work. This is literally never supposed to happen. If you have pin stacks in a lock, and we'll look at these in more detail over at the hands-on area. If you push all the way up on a pin stack, I'm literally crushing the spring here or here, I can't get the pins out of the plug. But let's say you have a wrong design. Let's say your lock has too much room. Comb picks go in, and they lift all the pins completely out of the plug, and the plug just spins around. This is an absolute real attack that works today on certain locks that are still sold today. Comb goes in, find the right spot, click. That padlock came right off the store shelf. There are a handful of locks, really cheap locks, everywhere that you can find that are still comb pickable. Attacking the release cam, attacking the tail side, reaching all the way through the lock and finding a release mechanism, you'll be shocked when I tell you this. I don't know if you have a lock that looks like this in your country. In our country, it's one of the most popular locks. It is everywhere on big construction sites, work zones where a lot of people all need access, but not everyone needs a key. You see these combination locks all the time where we come from. Why is this a great example of a bypass through the lock? I can take a thin blade, stick it right into the lock next to the wheels. If I have the blade up, I push down on it, the whole lock springs open. Why? Well, let's look at the inside. This lock, if you dial the right combination, this piece up here can rock. This is how the lock releases. Okay? That's the inner workings. I can slip a thin blade right through the wheels and rock it. I'm not attacking the dial, I'm not attacking the lock mechanism, I'm attacking the release, the tail side release. You never know, unless you've taken a lock apart, exactly what's going on in there, and we find these kind of weird flaws in really popular designs. So if I squeeze and I rock, you can see, I can just pop that open. And again, this lock is still on store shelves to this day. There are a lot of odd situations where manufacturers will do something wrong and a product winds up super popular. This is the tail side of another lock. In fact, let me jump back. Where's my mouse? This is not a lock pick. This is a bypass tool that reaches through and flicks the release on another lock. I love this story because the manufacturer, you're not looking at the front of this lock right here. This is the inside of the lock. It would be deep up in the keyway. And they said, oh, well, that hole shouldn't be there. So the manufacturer made a little disc of metal. And they said, well, if people are sticking bypass tools through the keyway, let's make this little disc, You eject the lock because it was made to be disassembled. You put the disk on, you close it up, and it's like they released a patch. It's like they said, download this, it's Tuesday, right? And you're good. But what happens when somebody releases a patch? People immediately reverse engineer it and figure out how to exploit it. So sure enough, a locksmith firm made this. It's called a wafer breaker, and it's designed to punch a hole exactly where you need it inside this little disk. So now another super popular padlock in my country is still vulnerable to a bypass, because I can reach right down, right through the hole that I've made, and just spring the lock apart. So we see these everywhere. These are not obscure locks where I come from. I'm sure there may be locks where you are that are super popular, and they're wicked easy to open. They're just all over the place. And if you've never tried picking or bypassing, be aware of that. Be aware that you are possibly using locks in the field right now that someone like me can exploit very, very easily. Padlocks, it's usually pretty easy to attack, the cheap ones. It's also pretty easy to fix, because if you're just using, a higher quality lock, if you spend a little more. By the way, this is a great picture. This was a water supply. I could just drive right out into the main water reserve. Like, that was the lake where I could just drive my truck into the lake if I wanted to. This was another water storage tank. Again, cheap, terrible padlock. These are critical resources where I come from, and anyone can just walk right up to them. Or you can get on top of a water tower and, spray paint something, and who knows what people do in the rurals of my country. But in general, who's starting to think a little bit more about this stuff? Who has seen something new that they never learned before today? Okay. We're gonna do a little quiz here. If you look at this door, let's see what you've learned. Like, I'm on the inside looking out. What are some things we're seeing here? We've got a gap, absolutely. What do you think the lock on this door is? Is it using a strike, or what's holding the door shut? What's this big guy right here? It's a magnet. It's an electromagnet. By the way, you can see the little green light. It's a sensor on the inside. So absolutely, I could just put gas through the door and open this door. But magnets are also interesting, because magnets, they need power to work. Electromagnets do. This was the basement of a hospital. And it looks like I'm on the inside of the door, because you can see the crash bars are there. But there's a card reader. This was an interconnect between two secured areas, and you needed a card reader on both sides. So I can instantly tell this is a magnet, because I walk up to the crash bars and I push them, and it's not working. Well, obviously there's got to be a magnet on the other side of this door. Well, you look up here and you say, all right, so I got some pipe conduit and I got a little plate. Either there's a sign on the other side of the door, like lit up, or this is probably the power for the magnet. And sure enough, it was. We unscrewed it, and the client, again, we showed the client, yeah, we unscrewed it, we pulled the wires, and the door opened. And the client, the hospital administrator, said, how did you, that's really ballsy. Like, what did you stand on a ladder? And I was like, no, I stood on a chair. And they said, but you were standing up, like, in the hall, no one noticed? I'm like, dude, it took 15, 20 seconds. If somebody, and then when we were doing it, standing on a chair, and I'm like, look, this is what I did. A doctor came through the door the next day, and you know what the doctor said? He said, oh, excuse me, you should put up a sign if you're working, and he kept walking. And I said, of course that's what someone's going to say. No one expects to be the bad guy. Threats come from a lot of weird angles, man. So think about all this stuff. Think about maybe next year, maybe Babak will come back. We've done a lot of new electronics work. We're very big into the electronics side as well. We're not just mechanical. We've done card cloning and copying. This is Babak after copying a badge, popping open a wiring closet with his Proxmark. So there's a lot of odd vulnerabilities in the physical space. I really love something that he's done now. We take long-range readers. You see these in parking garages, and we change the guts. Babak weaponizes them. So they have, like an Arduino, they have their own power. They run, and they're logging credentials on an SD card or even on a Bluetooth connection to his phone. And we call this the hunt pad. So he just walks around and he just badge, 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 just walking next to people. If you watch Mr. Robot, the hunt pad was in Mr. Robot. We're very proud of that fact. In the end, think about what I've talked about. The padlock stuff, easy to fix. So shimming the latch on the top, use a double ball mechanism. Use a shim-proof padlock. The skeleton keys, please don't use warded locks for anything. Thankfully, you don't see them much here. Overlifting the pin stacks, again, a properly fabricated lock cannot be overlifted. Releasing by reaching all the way through, make sure your lock blocks any type of attack that reaches all the way through to the cam. There are a lot of, you can just talk to locksmiths about, I need a good quality padlock. You're not going to face these problems. As far as the doors, you may have to fix a couple of things sometimes. Those hinges, remember jam pins or security hinges so I don't pop the pins out of the door frame. The latch on the inside, make sure the anti-thrust or the dead latch mechanism, the anti-loiting mechanism, is working and fit correctly to the door. Reaching through to the thumb turn or reaching through to the crash bar, make sure the doors fit well with a good deadbolt and have a blocker mechanism. Please don't use little key boxes, like remove them for if you have them, you shouldn't be using them. Talk to legal if it's like an emergency box. The big gap where I shot the air through, again, you can block that gap off. You can actually get gaps where the door closes and a plate will flip shut right when the door closes. These exist. Talk to your locksmiths about this. Reaching underneath, hooking the handle, I love that attack. You can get a dynamic door bottom, or you can just shroud off, or you can even change the position of the handle on the inside. And lastly, not like people are jacking your door frames at the office, but they do have hooking bolts or hammerhead deadbolt, something that locks the deadbolt into the door frame. Now this looks like a lot, and yes, all of these fixes cost money, but it's achievable. I mean, in US dollars, you're talking about less than $1,000. If everything is wrong with your door, you spend less than $1,000, you made that door fine. And that's not a bad way to spend. It's way better than most money you're spending to fix stuff on your network. And I like this fact. I like that most of the time, when I'm on a job and I show a client, oh look, I got in through here, and I'm like, yeah, so it's like a 1/4 inch off. It's a couple of millimeters, you could fix that here. And there's locksmiths love this. There's an article, I love an article in a locksmith magazine where a latch wasn't hitting right, it wasn't holding the plunger, and the locksmith he's like, look, I took this plate off, I riveted a piece of metal, put it back on, solved. Most of these problems that I exploit all the time and the things that get me in are fixable with a bag of tools. And you can do this on your sites. You can fix these problems for not a lot of money. I don't mind if you make my job harder. I'd rather you be safe, and I appreciate the time and I appreciate you listening. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the talk, and thanks for putting up with our little technical issues.
No problem.
So, as you kept perfectly on time, we do have time
Great.
for 1 or 2 questions if you have them. I'll come with the mic to you.
I guess I got a couple. First of all, have you ever encountered a door you didn't manage to get into? And also, once I locked myself out of my apartment, and I called one of these guys to let me in, and he came along with some machine that he stuck into the lock, and it just made a hell of a lot of noise for a long time, and then he was able to get in.
Okay.
I mean,
was it a drill? Because they make noise, but I don't.
Well, I mean, it didn't look like a drill.
It was probably it's a vibration attack. It's a vibro pick is most likely what he used.
And I mean, it occurred to me that there's probably a much easier way of getting in after seeing what you were doing.
There was probably, I would say, an elegant way may have existed. But yeah, a lot of locksmiths will do that. And to your first question, yes, almost. There's never been a facility that we couldn't get into, but we've had occasions where a door looks really good, and we're like, not messing with that. Let's find a different door somewhere else.
In the US, have you ever had problems with guys with security guards with guns threatening to shoot you or anything?
They've never threatened to shoot us, but we've done armed guard jobs before.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
That was one of the best stories, because when the badge reader pad, we copied a guard's credential, and it's really hard to do that to armed guards because they're trained, and every time we got close, they kept blading off because that's just how they're trained. They're going to have a standoff distance. And we sent Robert in, the guy who used to be a cop, and he just talked cop stuff with him. And at the end, he's like, all right, well, fellas, I got to get out of here. All right, nice seeing you. He grabbed one guy. He's like, come here, man. He just gave the guy a hug, and he swung the bag, and that's how we got the badge read. Yeah. Anyone else?
Anyone else? Questions? Come on. The cheapest way to ask him questions.
Yes, indeed. Yes, sir.
Coming.
Wait. I can repeat it, or he'll give you the mic.
So now with all this internet of stuff, connected everywhere, now we start seeing smartphone application to open your door.
Oh, yeah.
Are you actually investigating those flaws on those applications?
So, yes. We have a really excellent friend of ours. His name is Mike Ryan, R-Y-A-N, and he is the one, he made a Bluetooth tool called Crackle in the past. He's basically one of the best guys doing Bluetooth. He was with us when we went to one of the biggest lock companies today. They invited us to speak about lock attacks because they're trying to stay ahead of the curve. So we do have friends who look into that. There's a couple of interesting talks that have come out. The Padlock was called the no-key padlock. That's not us who researched it, but a friend of ours from Germany, Ray. He did some really good research there. Most of those times, you're seeing people who just exploit the app. They download and they reverse the APK, and they realize that the API is leaking terrible information, and that's usually the lower bar to attack. So most of the time, that's what we see when those locks get exploited.
You mentioned it a few times that there are regional differences in locks used and door designs used. How big is this? Is it inside the US as well?
Yeah.
Have
Not
you been over here and looked at different stuff?
Yeah.
Italy, Germany, UK. How big is the difference between the countries?
The difference is huge. From the locks in the US are terrible. We have not a lot of brands. There's not a lot of differentiation, and there's not a lot of anti-pick or anti-bypassing measures. We have just lower caliber of security. Mostly this has to do with industry standards. In the US, if a lock is certified, the industry is certifying itself. In many countries, I have a lot of friends in Holland, and they have a system where the police will certify it, and there'll be stars on the lock, number 1, 2, or 3 star lock. And I don't know, do you know of your certifications here? Or many times in Europe, insurance companies are certifying lock. They're called insurance lock. In Germany, Abbas, they make the insurance lock. It's not that Abbas says, hey, this lock is great. It's that insurance companies have vetted it. That's the biggest difference we see. Your locks, oh my God, Eva. Holy shit, I love Eva. Who uses an Eva lock on their place here in Austria? It's magnificent. Yeah.
I don't think it's just the locks, it's also the door design.
That's true too. We have a little bit closer to that. In every country, you can have weak doors or you can have really strong, well-framed doors. It has to do with who's willing to spend the money to put the door together. We see better door fitment in Europe as well, but I've still done some of these sorts of attacks on European doors sometimes. We have more guns in the US, so we don't use the locks as much. Yeah.
And on that bombshell, thank you very much, Steven. Thank you so much.